Well, hello one time, and praise the Lord. This is Oscar Terrazas, coming to you from my little recording studio, trying a different format here. Prayerfully, this maybe comes out even a little more clear. In any case, if you are interested in some of my other presentations, in the YouTube search, just go Oscar John Terrazas. And there on the slide, you will see also my email address in case you want to comment or mail me something. You can do that also. And this is some new material that has come up with everything happening. And then at the same time, I did do a little blurb on some of my other material, and I'll mention that as I go along. So let's get into this right away. Don't have a whole lot of time, don't want to take a lot of your time in the name of the Lord. So let's get into this presentation, and I entitled this one, The Puzzle of Prophecy, Signs of the Last Days. And there's my full name there again, so that you can either search for my other YouTube presentations or also email me at o.brazos@comcast.net. I'm one that believes that prophecy or various points of prophecy can also have a double application. So let me give just one example. One of the examples is the desecration of the temple of God in Jerusalem was done by Epiphanes. And so that was before Christ, about 160 years before Christ. And it'll happen again. So there is a double application. We can't be dogmatic and say this is the one that happens, this is the only thing. We can note in prophecy from what we studied that it can happen again. In other words, history repeats itself, or the old saying is, if you don't know your history, you're destined to repeat the history. And it doesn't seem like man learns in his rebellion to go against God again and again. So let's get on with the presentation. Should we even study prophecy? Some argue. Real quickly, Matthew 16. In the morning it shall be foul weather today, for the sky is red and lowering. Or you hypocrites, can you not discern the face of the sky? But you cannot discern the signs of the times. So Jesus Christ challenged them as to whether or not they knew what was really going on, or at that point, the return of Messiah. But in Acts chapter 1, he said unto them, it is not for you to know the times or the seasons which the Father has put in his own power. But yet, in Matthew 24 and also in Luke 21, he sat upon the Mountain of Olives, and they asked him, when shall these things be? Because Jesus was speaking of prophetical events and what would happen over the world. So in some cases, I believe that, such as Acts chapter 1, that it was for the time and the moment, because after all, we do have 16 prophets of the Old Testament. We have the book of Revelation. Jesus spoke about prophetical events. Should we study prophecy? Yes, because it gives us faith and hope for those that believe. Now, many hang their events on calendars. Well, one thing is, if you get into the study of calendars, you will know that there's actually a Jewish calendar. It's the year 5780 on the Jewish calendar, but yet on the Julian Gregorian calendar, we're in the year 2020. And I say Julian Gregorian because originally it was the Julian calendar, started about 46, what is now 46 BC, by Emperor Julian. And then later on in 1580, Bishop Gregorian took out 10 days out of the calendar to readjust it with astronomical timing. And so now it becomes a Julian Gregorian calendar. How about the year 4717 on the Chinese calendar? How about the Aztec calendar? 2012, everybody got excited. It was a nocturne year. And what I found fascinating about the Aztec calendar is that it was actually the end of a precession of the equinox cycle. And I won't even get into that in this presentation. Maybe this is what Jesus meant when he said, But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Because we've had numerous calendars that have come over the year. So, for example, in the year 2020, this year, I'm speaking in April at the end of 2020 here during the pandemic. Jewish Passover fell on April the 9th, which was a Thursday, not Saturday. Yet Christians will celebrate Good Friday because they're flexible on their calendar. And Easter was April the 12th. But yet Jewish Passover, which originally knows we all matched up, was on Thursday. So you can see then that maybe we don't know the hour or the day. So I cover this in 5 sections. First section, the 4 blood moons. This became really popular several years ago as there was 4 lunar eclipses. I actually wrote a book. It's out on Amazon. I call it 3 blood moons. And the reason why is because the Jewish calendar goes from March to February on our Julian Gregorian calendar. And so, in order to get the 4 blood moons, you have to cross into 2 years. Like, for example, you would have to go from 2020 to 2021 in order to get all the blood moons. So, let's just cover the most recent ones. Obviously, they repeat, not all at the same time. So, in 1492 to 1493, the Edict of Expulsion of the Jews by King Ferdinand of Spain was on March 31st, right before Passover. And Columbus was sent to discover the New World. Well, this is one of the keys in the 4 blood moons, and that is that, and I cover this, by the way, in Heavens Declare God's Glory, is that the blood moons must happen near and around the Jewish festivals. And so when they happen during those festivals, that's what makes them pertinent. That's what makes them sort of exclusive. And this happened exactly during that time in 1492. In 1948, we had another series of 4 blood moons. Israel became a nation on May 14th, 1948. 1967 to 1968 was the Six-Day War. And what was significant about that is that Israel recaptured the Temple Mount because they didn't have it. And it also signified that on May 30th was Pentecost on the Jewish calendar at the end of the Feast of Weeks. So that also became very interesting. Well, our most recent one was 2014 to 2015. And so I did a little table there for you. April 15th was the lunar eclipses, October the 8th, April 4th, September 28th. Remember, we have to cross 2 years. And then just for the heck of it, I put in also solar eclipses that happened during the time. And then I also put the equinox, which I explained in one of my other presentations, and the festival that it covered. So on April 15th, it covered festivals. On October the 7th was a Feast of Tabernacles. Notice the eclipse was October the 8th. And in the next year, Passover was April the 4th. And note then that the lunar eclipse was April the 4th. And there's some also that go into the Jubilee sequence. Again, when did it actually start? There's a lot of debate, different men. But what I try to do in my presentations is to show you the trend of where it's all going, the mentality of the world, where we're headed to. And so some would argue that on September 23rd, which was September 28th was a lunar eclipse, was also the end of a Jubilee year. The other thing that happened was on January 21st of 2019, there was a super blood moon over Israel and North America. Normally we get lunar eclipses 2 to 3, sometimes even 4 during a year in different parts of the world. It doesn't always show up. It could show up in South America instead of North America, in Europe and we don't see it from the United States or only in Israel. So you see the patterns change. So the patterns become significant as to when God is doing things in his timing. And so on January 21st, 2019, there was a super blood moon. By super, it just means that the moon does not circle the earth in a perfect circle, but instead is more of an eclipse. It's more of an eclipse. And this is one of the times when it was very close. But here's another thing. The next four blood moons will happen in 2032 to 2033. Remember, the Jewish calendar covers 2 years. And it'll be April 25th and October 18th. But the next year, 2033, it will be April 14th, which would be Jewish Passover, and then October 18th, which is Jewish Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles. Am I saying that's when Jesus is going to come? I'm not saying something significant usually happens during these four blood moons. Or in 2014, as Pastor Hagee wrote also his book, coming out of San Antonio, Texas, is that something is about to change. Well, part two, Satan's footprint. I found this fascinating as I study these next couple of things, in that Satan is at work. We know he is the author of chaos and lies upon this world. And one of the things that happened with ISIS when they were attacking and destroying things, that anything that was idol, is they began to destroy, or they destroyed most of the Temple of Baal in Palmyra, Syria. And this is a picture more or less of what was left, which was the arch and the entrance way, pathway into the Temple of Baal. And the interesting thing that happened is the Heritage Foundation of the World decided that this was somehow historical great significance. So they actually were able to then salvage this as ISIS was beaten back, and they made a laser copy of this arch to the Temple of Baal. And they took this arch and reassembled. They made several copies, so it was a copy, and they displayed it in 5 cities of the world. And I'm going to speak about those right now. And so what was interesting is that one of the areas where they went was Dubai of the United Arab Emirates in February the 12th of 2017 during the World Government Summit. So that arch that you see there is one of the duplicates that was made. It still weighed tons, and they reassembled it there and put it on display in an Islamic country of all places. One of the other places that they displayed it was in Trafalgar Square in London on April 19th, right before Jewish Passover. And there you got the unveiling of it in the square. And that was right before Jewish Passover. Another place they did it was Florence, Italy on March 27th, 2017. And there you see then the arch going up. Obviously, this was also before a Passover coming in early April of 2017. But there was another thing that happened there, and that there was a G7 summit of the major countries of the world. And it's G7, it used to be G8, and I'll speak about that in a little bit. But there was a G7 summit also during this time when they brought in this Arch of Baal. Then it was also displayed in a park in New York. Now, what was interesting about that is that originally when they brought it in, is that they brought it in as the Arch of Baal. Because that's what it was. It was the entrance to the Temple of Baal. And everybody went, and Christians and what have you, and said, "Oh my God, a pagan on." So what they did was they took it away. They took it away to London and then brought it back. But they brought it back as the Arch of Palmyra, the city where the temple was. So now it was okay because, after all, it's not the Arch of Baal, it's the Arch of Palmyra, but it was the same arch. And it was actually brought into Washington, D.C. on October the 1st, 2016. And it was right before Rosh Hashanah, the new year, in the year 5777, on October the 3rd of 2016. The arch was then redisplayed there, as you can see it in the picture. And so to me, this was sort of significant. What is we're saying here? The devil, what is he saying? What is Satan is saying? The God that was the most hated and corrupted Israel throughout the Old Testament was the God of Baal, which was sort of a general term, and everybody sort of made it a little bit different as to the kind of God that it was. But anyway, all the activities and the sacrifices around the Baal were all evil, including the sacrifice of children. The other event that I found interesting in this subject was the Goddard Tunnel. I'm sorry, the Goddard Tunnel. It was 17 years in the making, was the longest underground tunnel in the world, connecting North and South Europe, which was going to cut a lot of time as far as crossing from north to south, and was dedicated in June of 2016. But what was interesting was the ceremony was a bit strange. In fact, the ceremony involved leaders of the European Union. They all came and they had an audience of very high uppity people and what have you. And you can look this up on YouTube, by the way, if you want to see the actual ceremony of the Goddard Tunnel. And it included peoples in chains, dancing and moaning and groaning and angelic creatures and what have you. The picture that I show you there was a lady holding up a lamb as if they're bringing a lamb to the sacrifice. Well, from inside the tunnel, they go to outside the tunnel, and all kinds of people again moaning and groaning, and these demonic creatures, and all of a sudden appears a man dressed in a headdress and half goat, which we know is the goat representation of Satan, known as the Baphomet. And you have this goat man going around and hissing and clawing at people and what have you. So it was really, really a strange event because outside they had actual, how would you say, mascots, you could say, of the heads of the European Union, some of the heads of the European Union, and they had, like they, just like on football games, they had this head on, and people were walking out, and they were staring at this hypnotic teletron, this big, huge screen, like it was hypnotizing them, and they were all part of this event, and Satan was taking over. A lot of satanic overtones. There was a woman in red dress that was pregnant, ready to have a child, obviously pregnant. Really, really weird. Well, it goes on even further. And when President Trump came into power and won, witches now began to cast spells to bind President Trump. One of them was Michael Hughes. And in 2017, there you see him with his video, and it was reported by various newspapers. I give you the YouTube there, there on the screen. Witches cast mass spell with hopes of removing Trump from office. Well, since when are witches interested in the presidency or publicly declaring the presidency? But here we go. Even witches are interested in taking our president down. So whether you're for Trump or not a Trump, it's not the point that I'm trying to make. What I'm trying to make the point is that witches are trying to change governments, that they're involved, just like this Goddard tunnel scene in which leaders of the European Union were involved in this demonic presentation. Another section, one world religion. Well, this has been going on for years and years, and but what was interesting in the year 2000, because I believe this comes over a little bit of time, it doesn't happen right away. There was an old article I brought up, and the Pope was amended a Vatican pronouncement that the Roman Catholic Church was the only way to salvation, saying that heaven is, now he's saying that heaven is open to all as long as they are good. In other words, the Catholic Church has always held, the Roman Catholic Church has always held exclusivity. They're the only ones with God's voice. There is the vicar of Christ. The Pope in the church should be the only church on earth. And all of a sudden, Pope John made this total 180-degree change. And in this article, he says, all the just of the earth, including those who ignore Christ and his church, are called upon to build the kingdom of God. Now, this is also then ratified by Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, who became the next pope. He became the next pope. So obviously he was for it. Pope John he gathered a world convention to pray. He invited Buddhists and Hinduists and Protestants and all kinds of different denominations, including Indian spiritualists who call spirits from the ground and spirits of the animals, were all invited to pray together. So let me jump a little bit. Like I said, this is more or less a summary now. Let me jump a little bit to Pope Francis. Well, here in February 4th, 2019, he went and met with the Grand Imam, Islamic faith, Al-Azhar, and to sign a document on human fraternity, coming to an agreement that God is God. The Pope also at the same time called for a world conference, a global compact on education. There's his website. It was set for April the 6th, 2020, right around Passover, but was moved because of what we're going through with the coronavirus, was moved to May 14th. Now it's been postponed again to October the 15th, right during the Feast of Tabernacles. So now Pope Francis is involved. And what makes this interesting is that within the Catholic Church, there are those that are crying for reformation. We all know the scandals of the priests that have violated children, and the millions and millions, I mean, we're talking about over $500 million that the Catholic Church has paid out in claims and settlements because of violations by priests. And there are good Catholics that believe that the leadership has been taken over by a cabal of evil. In fact, there's a book written on it. And this is just three of the organizations that want to see change in the Catholic Church. The Remnant, the Five Thesis Group, the Voice of the Faithful. These are all Catholic organizations that believe that somehow the Pope is in error. And if you want to see one of my other presentations on the 122 popes and the last one, you're welcome to it. It's in one of my videos. But here it is. Even they're seeing there's something wrong. There's something going on. The world governments have always been around ever since the formation of the League of Nations, the United Nations, government summits, shaping the future of the governments worldwide. And we see that they want to do it through innovation, technology, to bring all these world reformers together and create a government. Even there's other men that are involved in it. One of them was Saul Alinsky. He published his book, and you can get it online, PDF for free, Rules for Radicals. Now, what makes Alinsky, apart from the fact that he was very communist, is that in his dedication, there's three quotes from three different people, and one of them is his own. And he quotes, "Lest we forget at least an over-the-shoulder acknowledgement to the very first radical, da 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 da, and did it so effectively that he at least won his own kingdom, Lucifer." So the first rule of change is controversy. You can't get away from it. We see a lot of controversy going on right now. Because it is over this that all issues become controversial. Change means movement. Movement means friction. Friction means heat, and heat means controversy. So all they want to do is rebel. And some of the best friends of Saul Alinsky and his mantra was President Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, were his students. They went after him. What does that tell you? What is going on even in our leadership and not just the Catholic Church? A very famous broadcaster was Walter Cronkite, and he spoke before the United Nations, as many speakers are called to speak, on October 19th, 1999. Here's some of his quotes. "It seems to many of us that we are to avoid the eventual catastrophic world conflict. We must strengthen the United Nations as a first step toward a world government, patterned after our own government, with a legislature, executive and judiciary, and police to enforce its international laws and keep the peace. To do that, of course, we Americans will have to yield up some of our sovereignty. Today, we must develop federal structures on global level. We need a system of enforceable world law, a democratic federal world government to deal with world problems." So here's a man who was highly respected. And they want a United Nations ID, identification, by 2030. And it is part of the 17 Sustainable Goals of the World. Article 16.9 reads, "By 2020, provide legal identity for all, including birth registration." Now, they've already tested this out by a company in the country of India, which has a little bit over 1 billion people. It's called Aadhaar. And it is implemented. It is supposedly voluntary. Supposedly they can't hold government services if you don't have it, but they are really, really pushing it. So the technology is there in order to then identify the world like we've never seen before. We've seen a couple of different ones, and I have some presentations on it with the chip and the marks and everything else. But this one, they've actually implemented it in a country of 1 billion people in India. It has photo ID, 10 fingerprints, and 2 iris scans. Another section, the third temple. Why is it so important? Why is this temple controversy? People are for it, against it. Archaeology, PhDs and doctorate, they're for it, against it. It's here, it's there, everywhere. Well, Exodus 40 reads, "And Moses was not able to enter the tent of the congregation because the cloud abode thereon, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle." The tabernacle represents the concentration of the glory of God. In 1 Kings 8, we know that if Israel were to lose its place in God, that they must go back to the temple from whence they will receive then forgiveness. They must confess the name of the Lord. To be right with God, they need the temple. And so this is where the temple is now becoming more important. So there's some then that declare that, the Messiah will build the temple. And then there's a group saying, no, we're going to build the temple. Then there's Christian groups that are supporting the building of the temple. In fact, where in the heck did all this idea start? Well, believe it or not, it started in August 28th of 1909. That's right, that long ago. The Freemasons planned to rebuild Solomon's Temple at Jerusalem came out of Illustrated London News, and there it's a little bit blurry, a little bit, but nonetheless, you get the point. It was a copy of the newspaper page, page 39, in that article of the Illustrated London News. They had other motives with the Masons, and we won't get into that one. But nonetheless, they believe it or not, there's Islamic groups that say, yeah, let's build the third temple. Now, why would Islamic groups and a section of them want the third temple? Well, very simply because there's a section of Islam that believes in the final days. In fact, it's one of their primary beliefs. In order to be a believer, you have to believe in the last days and the coming of the 12th Imam, their Messiah. And right before the coming of the 12th Imam, Jesus will appear to make peace and prepare the world for the 12th Imam and bring a peace agreement of anywhere from 7 to 9 years upon the earth so that the 12th Imam will appear. So Muslims are looking forward to the third temple. They're saying, yeah, bring it on. It'll help bring on to prove that Islam is the true faith. But they're not the only ones. A Pentecostal Christian believer in Brazil was elected as president of Brazil to bring reformation to Brazil with all the corruption they've had down there. And he's for supporting the building of the third temple. In fact, Breaking Israeli News newspaper, and you can look up for yourself, I have a copy there, is that the Sanhedrin, which has now been in place since 2014, the Council of 70, is there in Jerusalem in the Old City. And that's another one, a part of my presentation. You can look it up on Temple Update 2019. But the Sanhedrin now ask Putin, President Putin, and President Trump to help build the third temple. So even they are getting involved. At the time at the 70th dedication, 70 years, Israel, Cyrus returns part of Israel back to Jerusalem to build the temple. Here we are at the 70th anniversary of the country of Israel since 1948, 70 years. And so now we have this ceremony of the 70th year anniversary of Israel. And Pompeo was there. There's a picture of him. And he was given a commemorative photo of the Temple Mount from, one of the drones up above. But oops, there was a mistake. Here's the blow up, and you can see the blow up, and on the Temple Mount, the mosque and the Dome of the Rock have been photoshopped out, and instead there's a similitude of the Temple of God sitting more or less where the mosque is. So what's going on is that there are now writings and things I have read that even Netanyahu would like to see a division of the Temple Mount, divide it in half, give the Dome of the Rock to Islam, and then they'll occupy the area where the mosque is. And since Muhammad went from the dome and not from the mosque, and occupy and then rebuild the Temple of God in unison so that Islam and Israel, the Jewish faith, will sort of be in peace together. So they've already got fake photos of the whole thing. So there's the area where they think that it might be, and there's all kinds of controversy. I even wrote a book on the subject, and Pride, Control, and Power, and also on the signs of the heavens and the three blood moons, and so on where the temple should be, because it is controversial. Many thought it was the Dome of the Rock, and there's those that, because of political motivation, And because of uh, the different sects of even the Jews, now there's some that say, you know what? The temple could be over south a little bit because of the Gihon Spring, recent archaeological discoveries. This is nothing new. It's been going on for more than 20, 25 years. And they're all siding with each other. But it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. The truth is what you believe. And if you believe that the temple should be here instead of where the dome is, you're going to say, yeah, build it. Will it be the false temple or not the real temple? Because nobody really knows unless you dig underneath the whole Temple Mount as to where the original temple really was. And it's just that it's been corrupted and broken and rebuilt. I mean, Herod's temple during the time of Jesus, he expanded it 3 times. The Temple Mount was expanded 3 times its original temple area, 3 times, filled in. You can go to the Wailing Wall, and you're about 40 feet below this temple site, down to the original temple site, 40 feet below. So what I'm saying is, I don't know. Maybe we don't know the day or the hour because there's so many complication of things. But what we do know is that all of this movement should then move us to great joy if you're a believer. It would move us to great excitement in knowing that our predictions of the coming of the Lord, our belief of the coming of Jesus Christ, our knowing that prophecy we will be fulfilled. The Quran has no prophetical sayings, none at all. The Bible, hundreds and hundreds of prophetical events that have come true, that we can line up year after year regardless. We can come close, and some are looking for the exact date. No, don't look for the exact date. Look for the seasons. Look for where the winds are blowing. We have a pandemic going on. We've had pandemics for years and years. In fact, they count them. H1N1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. We're up to H7. And most of them are type A, which is avian. But we also have swine flu, dog flu, horse flu. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has close to 8 million cases of bird flu, which was a pandemic in 2004, 2007. Hundreds of thousands of people across the world died of this. No world shutdown. Economies weren't shut down. The stock market wasn't shut down. Companies weren't closed. And so on we go. In October 24, 2009, President Barack Obama declared the swine flu a national emergency in the United States. And of these flus, over 675,000 Americans have died. Now we're shutting down everything. And so far in the world, 167,000, 168,000 tragically have succumbed to this. And the bird flu has a 60% kill rate. The coronavirus, the current one, had a 3.5% kill rate. And there was no shutdown during the bird flu. So we're wondering what is going on. Don't just look at the statistics. See where the winds are blowing. See what is happening today. And is the world being prepared for something else? Zechariah 14:4. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the mountain of olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. And the mount of olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west. And there shall be a very great valley. And the half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, and half of it toward the south. There's the Dome of the Rock. There's the rising of the east. Another one of my presentations and theories that the rising of the east will probably be at the time of Passover, or now after further study of 5 years of looking into this and the astronomy of it, it could be that the rising sun of the east will be at the time of atonement, a time when, Leviticus 16, that they would open the doors of the temple of God. Remember, they had no natural light, only the candlestick, in which the doors would open and the sun would shine upon the Holy of Holies on that day when the sun would line up. Could this really be it? Well, again, don't look for the day. Jesus said it. But note the seasons. Are we closer now to the coming of the Lord than this has been? I have been through these presentations for more than 15 years of my life. And now they're saying that the doomsday clock is within 30 seconds. Well, I've been tracking the doomsday clock for more than 15 years, and it's always been within a couple of minutes. But we've never had so many different prophetical events coming to pass and going on. All I can say is be ready, whether it's today, tomorrow, next year, or maybe at the next 4 blood moons, which is about 12 years, 13 years from now. But the season is here. Be ready for the coming of the Lord. It is coming to pass.